Hello, writing community, and welcome to the Friday Night Chat Show. We are very, very excited to be here, and it is Friday. We have made it through this week, and we're nearly at the end of January, which is quite fantastic, and it still seems to be taking forever, especially being on dry January, which is kind of breaking me at the moment. But hello, Chris Hooley is here with us. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm so excited about tonight's guest. It's going to be a great show. So yeah, I can't wait to get her on and have a little chat about this amazing book.
Absolutely. And for you guys, if this is your first time here, whether you're watching or listening on the podcast, this is a live show. So what we do is we feed off your interaction and your questions. You can send them in or you can just interact with us. So make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss the live shows. But if you do happen to miss the live shows, like I said, we do have the podcast you can listen to when making a coffee or driving a car, any of those kind of good things. So hello to you if you are watching this right now, and get your questions in for later on in the show. We will be using them, of course. But yeah, this is very exciting. And, you know, it's kind of crazy. We're flying through season 4 again. Every season just seems to be an absolute whirlwind. And we get some incredible guests on. And tonight is no different. And it's a very exciting kind of story that's going on. It's kind of a fairy tale world for people who are releasing books, and especially, you know, new authors. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot of great books out there at the minute, and this is one of the best that you'll read this year. And I'm going on record saying that, so it must be.
And there was loads of good, amazing books that came out yesterday at the same time as well, which we might talk about in a bit. But there's new news. We're on TikTok, Chris Hooley.
Does that mean we have to dance?
No, that is not happening. No, what TikTok is, right, is a crazy social platform. You've probably heard about it, and maybe for the wrong reasons. But I was informed that there's quite a big book talk. Hashtag book talk is on there.
You're so much like a dad right now. It's untrue.
I know.
What TikTok is, kids, is this.
anyway, but there's loads of book things on there that's incredible. So it may be an avenue especially if you're writing young adult fiction. Maybe get your books on there and have a look at it, because it might be worth it. Hello to you on the chat. Hello. So let's start the show off with a beer token book promotion, as we always do. And this week it is, if you look at the bottom of the screen, if you're watching, if you are listening, then the show notes on the podcast, you will see all this information. Will Castillo, his book, Jake Howard Multiverse 101, is a sci-fi fantasy set in upstate New York in 1997. It's got 11 ratings so far, 4.8 out of 5, which is fantastic. And it's available as an ebook, paperback, and as an audiobook. When Jake was in the 9th grade, he discovered a mysterious portal while on a field trip that was going in a flash. It was gone in a flash, but the image never left his memory. Now in 1997, Jake is about to start his junior year at the State University of New York, where he meets Beth. And Beth is brooding, mysterious, and about to shatter poor Jake's perception of the universe. He said he wrote this. What are you laughing at, Chris?
I'm just glad you got through that little bit at the end, because knowing what your reading ability is like.
Fantastic. I'm glad I bring this joy to you, Chris. I really am. And that's what I'm here for, bringing joy.
I just imagine that to be so much worse.
He set the book in and around his hometown of Wallkill in New York. I'm not sure if that's said right. And there's a bunch of 90s music and pop culture references in the book, which he actually has a Spotify playlist for, which you can see in the description as well. So please check that out and support the authors that support this show, because why not? You know. Oh yeah, of course, Chris. What am I missing up there? The book cover.
I think you'd miss that every time if I didn't do that.
I know, but it's kind of a thing now that I wait for your head to pop up there. So there it is. It's quite a dark cover. But like I said, the links are there. So go and check it out, please. And, upstate New York is interesting. When we were camping there, they had electrified dumpsters to keep away bears. Wow. And you went camping there where the bears were?
Wow. That's amazing.
That is amazing. So I think we should stop rambling on and get the guest in, because Chris, this story is really kind of blown my mind when we look at, you know, self-publishing and publishing and trying to make that breakthrough. There couldn't be a better success story, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you had to sit down and dream a success story, I think a lot of us do. And I think Abigail Dean's story, tonight's guest, is probably something that you would hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's stop yapping and get Abigail on. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's guest, Abigail Dean, her book was released yesterday called Girl A. You may have heard about it. It is probably one of the I think that's one of the best covers I've ever seen. So let's introduce the guest, Abigail Dean. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thanks. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. And first of all, how are you? How's things? Obviously, you've had a lot of kind of excitement in the last 24 hours. Have you settled down?
I don't think yet. It still feels, to be honest, very, very surreal. I think I kind of usually say just as kind of unbelievable and surreal as you would expect. So I'm not sure it has set in at all. And yeah, I might sleep at some point in like 2023. I don't know, like, we'll see.
I can imagine that the sleep before the day of release for this book must have been something that was quite short of actual sleep hours.
Yeah, I have to say, actually, I think the publishing process as a whole is not conducive to good night's sleep. I would say right from the very kind of beginning of the process, it's not great. So yeah, this was I think the night before publication was just another in a long stream
Mm.
of poor night's sleep, but
That
I'm
almost
not
sounds like
complaining.
it almost sounds like a great book in itself. The night before publication. I think someone should work on that one. But so for the people that obviously don't know about Girl A and its story, we will definitely get into that very shortly. But can we just, at the very start of the show, we always like to go back into the writer's sort of history as to why writing became something in their life.
Sure. So I have loved writing and sort of loved books from a really, really young age. My parents they're retired English teachers, but they were English teachers when I was growing up. So reading was quite a big big thing in our family. And I think that I just loved books as a kid and was very much kind of encouraged just to read for like the love of it. So I kind of read a huge amount of R.L. Stein's Goosebumps books. They were
Nice.
an absolute kind of favorite.
Mm.
Huge amounts of like Christopher Pike, his Spooksville books, Darren Shan, and then kind of graduated onto like Stephen King. And I just really loved reading, and I also sort of loved writing.
Mm.
My mum has recently kind of dug up some early classic
Amazing.
vintage stories, which is really great. Thanks, Mum. um, and yeah, like I wrote a lot as a teenager, a lot of fan fiction.
Mm.
Shamelessly, I really I liked writing fan fiction a lot. And so it was something that had always been a kind of fixture, to be honest. I remember
Yeah.
kind of like writing on my parents' desktop computer before school in like bold Times New Roman. I just remember like pages and pages.
The best of
Um,
fonts.
they're best ones. Bold, I'm not sure about that. And I think what like kind of looking back and on reflection, what is sort of slightly sad is I think I got to the age of sort of 17 or 18. And I think, to be honest, I just felt like writing wasn't, it almost wasn't something for me, like it was
Mm.
something like, this is impossible. Like, this is a bit of a pipe dream. Um, you know, it is probably like a bit unrealistic. And I was also a bit intimidated by the creative writing scene at university. And, it was just again, sort of just didn't really kind of feel like I fit into
Mm.
that world very well. And so for a big stretch of time in my 20s, I barely wrote at all. I had a job which involved relatively long hours, and I guess I'd kind of given up, which sounds ridiculous, in your 20s to have given up on something. It's slightly sort of weak-willed, I think. And yeah, I think I'm working kind of very long hours. I was working at a law firm, and I sort of spent about 6 years at least really just behind a desk.
Mm.
And I think that sort of took its toll over time. And as I was sort of coming up to my 30th birthday, I think I sort of took a look at the last few years, and I was almost a bit shocked, actually. I was kind of like, wow, you really do spend a lot of time at work and not a great deal amount of time doing anything else or anything that you necessarily kind of love doing. And it was a bit of a kind of epiphany moment to okay, I might have to change things and take a bit of an active step to return to give writing another shot, and to maybe kind of get a job that I can actually do more than more than just simply work. And yeah, that's what happens. I sort of took 3 months off work before starting a new job, and worked on Girl A, and yeah, then took a sort of another year to finish it. Obviously, 3 months sort of being a bit ambitious. So yeah, it's sort of I think that's the kind of story in terms of the role that writing's played in my life, and I'm very, very glad that I took the time to return to it, I think.
I certainly don't think that, in your 20s, when you're kind of trying to figure things out in life, that, changing your plans or changing your goals or even thinking that your goals have changed is something that's kind of unnatural or kind of, a letdown in that respect, because, we still, paths change often and often lead back to the right one. So, at that point, when you kind of giving up the ghost in terms of your writing, as someone who's done it as maybe a hobby, and perhaps people do this at a young age, build up the picture of how hard it is to become published or become a writer, when in reality, so many writers come back on this show and their advice is just do it. So perhaps there was that barrier that you built up and said, this is something that is, a hard thing to do, but clearly you have a very natural talent at this, so it's good that you've realigned with that side of things and found your way back into the writing. So
yeah, absolutely. I think you're totally right about the idea that sometimes I think you can almost be, maybe it's almost kind of like you get too much of the dream image of something as a teenager. And then, if it doesn't come particularly easily, I think sometimes as a teenager, the automatic reaction is to be a bit like, oh, well, that's that's it. And I think it takes sort of maybe a bit of age to realize that you might as well give yourself a shot. Why not?
I mean, I was particularly intrigued when you were talking about the university creative writing group, because I had like flashbacks from my own then, and I remember joining up. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you've got stories yourself, but I remember the first piece I read, I had literally one half of the room going, oh yeah, that was quite good, well done. And then the other half looked like they wanted to kill me. So I was like, this is not a conducive place for me to share my writing. So did you have sort of a similar experience? Is that why it kind of put you off for a little bit?
I almost don't think I kind of or even got that far. I think I'm with you in terms of, there's a lot of advice is sometimes given in terms of, you should really kind of share your writing, like you share it in workshops and share it in groups. And I think that actually, for some people that is fantastic, and you'll get really valuable feedback. I think for me, I was honestly kind of cripplingly like shy about it, and sensitive about it. And I would also say, to other people who are maybe kind of, people sort of are saying, make sure you get loads of feedback. And although that is helpful, I think, I don't think it's kind of necessarily crucial throughout your writing life. I think, it's a case of as and when you want it and feel like you need it, it's useful. But I certainly for a while was just really kind of excruciatingly, I don't want to say embarrassed, because I don't think that was quite it. It was more just really hesitant and had very little confidence in my own ability. And I think, if something like what happened to you, Chris, that had happened, I think I'd have been sort of crippled by that. But I was almost too scared to get to that stage, I think, when I was at university.
So at that moment then, when you sat down and you said, right, I've got 3 months, I don't know if this is how you did it, but you had 3 months of writing Girl A. Why did you decide to do that? Did you have the idea sort of fully formed, or did you just think, do you know what, I've got a bit of time before I start a new job, I'm going to get something down on paper?
I'd made a bit of a deal with myself beforehand, and before sort of ensuring that I had that 3 months, that I was going to spend it writing. And I'd had the idea before. I'd had this real this idea about these sisters in particular, who'd been in sort of a few character sketches and in a few short stories that I'd worked on in the years before, in the kind of minimal writing that I did do. And I think that sort of coincided with a real interest in true crime. And so the idea had sort of been brewing away for a while. And I think it was a case that I was like, okay, and if you're going to take 3 months off, you're going to try to use it to do something that you love. That was sort of a deal I made with myself, that I had to have an idea and I had to have made a bit of a start, and then just see how that 3 month period went.
Wow. So, sorry, Chris, I was going to say, when you actually started writing, did the initial idea change at any point? Or obviously you've got the sister element in there, but in Girl A, you've got other elements with, slightly larger family group as well. So did it sort of form as you were doing it, or did you always have those ideas in the back of your mind, sort of thing?
I think it changed a bit as I went along, because I think, even a few months before starting writing, I was still very much thinking about this kind of sister relationship. And I think then there were some other characters I'd been thinking of, and the Gracie family in Girl A just kind of grew from those other characters. And I think also the idea of Lex, the main character's mother, kind of leaving the children the house. It sort of became a bit more episodic in my head, in terms of this idea of that there would be sort of a larger family group, it was more of a scope as well, I think, to enjoy the different dynamics and the chemistry between the different siblings, which I think in terms of writing and thinking about Girl A was one of my favorite parts, like creating those different sibling relationships, whether it's something really tender like between Lex and her younger sister Evie, or whether it's something incredibly caustic and harsh and more like Succession-esque, with Lex and Delilah. So that was a really fun and joy of the book, I think.
Can you just have a very quick explanation of what the story is, for people that we're talking about? The sisters might not know what that story is.
Yeah, sorry. I was also
all right. We're jumping ahead.
Let's start talking about the characters. So Girl A is Lex Gracie, and she manages to escape from her parents' house, from her childhood home, which becomes known as the House of Horrors in the press. And she frees her 6 brothers and sisters when she does so, and exposes her parents' religious cult and the crimes and neglect of their children that's been happening there. And Girl A actually opens 15 years after that escape, by which time Lex is living in New York. She's a successful attorney. She really tries to do everything in her power not to think about her childhood and about her past. And that kind of has to change when her mother dies in prison. And she leaves Lex and her siblings the House of Horrors, the family home where they grew up. And that forces Lex to return to the UK and to reconnect with her siblings, revisiting those kind of old battles and old alliances to decide the fate of the family house.
It kind of reminded me like when Shakespeare left the only bed in the house to his wife. And I was like, it's that sort of backhanded sort of gesture, isn't it, in terms of leaving this house that's full of horrible memories and leaving it in a gesture of goodwill in a roundabout way, leaving it to them. It's almost like forcing them to go back and deal with everything that went on. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was in your thinking, but when I read it, I was like, yeah, that's kind of like my go-to.
Yeah, I love that association. I think it was definitely the case that it's a very kind of ambiguous sort of offering that's left to the children. And I think, Mother as a character, although she obviously kind of is dead by the beginning of the book, she's the kind of character who her intentions and her loyalties are often really ambiguous throughout. So I definitely see that association. I love it.
So, sorry, Chris, I keep jumping in.
A comment just came up, and I was going to ask it, but then realised we just covered that. So we'll have to, whoever, carry on, Chris. I apologise.
No worries. I was going to say, with Lex obviously being a lawyer and yourself having that background working in law, did you, when you first started writing her character, were you drawing a lot from yourself, or was she as far away from you as you could possibly get?
It's funny because I think Lex is a much better lawyer at a law firm than I think I was. I really wanted to sort of explore that idea. There's lots of ideas about burnout and about the pressure of working in a job in a city, and I think I definitely did experience that I found it difficult. I found those hours difficult to work. But what I sort of love about Lex's character, about creating that character, was the idea that in a way she finds solace in those hours and in that environment, in the kind of orderly nature of it. So I guess this thing that is often thought of as being a real kind of negative, kind of offices and airport lounges, this very sterile environment, she really kind of has great comfort in that, in kind of contrast to the messiness and the kind of dirt of her childhood. So yeah, it was quite kind of fun to create this character who has similar experiences to those that I had professionally, that has a very, very different reaction to them.
Nice.
Do you think that this kind of genre is now, as it's your first book, is this kind of your focus? Do you think you may stray from that? And as someone who, as reviews of this book have been tremendous and by many, many different people, terrifyingly gripping and incredibly well written, devastating in a good way. So as someone who's written into this kind of darker world, how did you deal with approaching those things as someone that was writing for the first time?
So in terms of genre, it's strange because I guess I didn't really consider genre very much before starting writing. I was very much sort of like, well, this is the story that I'm interested in telling, and I didn't think about genre sort of hugely. And I guess I sort of hope that will be the case in the future. And sort of, if without sort of planning around genre, I hope I can just plan to tell a story that I find really fascinating and moving as well, and that that's something that readers would respond to. And I think it's sometimes that thing, and one thing that I find sort of frustrating in terms of reading about books and the way that they're sometimes characterized is, I think it's very useful to have distinctions, like thriller and like romance, from a sort of commercial perspective. But then I think that they often come with baggage as well. Those sort of classifications. It's sometimes I think they can be thought of as lesser than kind of something that's sort of heralded as being literary. And I think that although I sort of appreciate the commercial reason for them, I think that ultimately most writers are probably just writing what the story they sort of love and want to tell. And so my hope is kind of that I can keep doing that. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit naive, but that's the plan so far.
So in this book, Abigail, you do. I mean, I'm not going to lie. When I was reading it, there was moments where I was like, "It's very difficult to read." Not because it wasn't written well, because it's fantastic, but the topic that you've explored in this book, in certain elements, is really quite difficult to read. And when you talked about going to university and having to avoid certain books on a reading list. I remember one book, it's called The Gathering. I can't remember who wrote it for the life of me. I was trying to think of it then when you were talking, but I can't remember who wrote it. But the issue of child abuse comes up, and sexual exploitation in that novel, and it did remind me of that when I was reading, obviously, Girl A. So from a writer's perspective, how do you go about writing something that you know could potentially make your reader feel uncomfortable, but you know is necessary for your storyline as well?
It's a really it's a really good question, and I think the first thing is sort of I yeah, I think you have to kind of acknowledge your own limitations to some degree. You know that it's very much a fiction, and it's not
Mm,
something that I've experienced. And I think there are obviously kind of particular, I think the sensitivities that come with that.
mm,
I was very, very um, aware and wanted to avoid Girl A being a book about kind of suffering in
mm,
terms of in any sort of form of exploitative way.
mm,
So I think that that although very dark things definitely happen to the characters, I didn't want that to be a sort of fixation on the book or be in any way kind of a sort of gruesome focus at
Mm.
all.
mm,
So I think that a lot of the events that take place in the novel are sort of in a way left for readers to um, gauge what really happened.
mm,
I don't want sort of to force people to read
mm,
incredibly violent scenes. I think that's something I was kind of wanted to be really careful about doing.
mm,
And I also wanted to kind of focus a lot on the characters and their strength and resilience as
mm,
well. So, I think although it's a dark book, it's also a kind of hopeful book.
Yeah.
Um,
mm,
and that kind of comes through in terms of having a narrator like Lex. I think in particular, this sort of incredibly strong yet reserved character, who's really kind of in spite of everything, is somebody I think you deeply kind of root for, and
mm.
who sort of has really kind of prevailed above what's happened to her, and that possibly applies to her siblings as well in
Yeah.
different ways, and in differing degrees, I think.
So, oh, sorry, Chris. I was just
No,
going to
you
say
carry on.
structurally, obviously throughout the book you do various different flashbacks and you have different characters' perspectives. So, from a writer's point of view, why did you decide to structure the book in that way?
I think it was something that was always there in a way. Once I started writing, that was kind of always going to be the case. One thing I really like about how the sort of structure works, almost at the end of it, and I'm not sure if this was necessarily an intention, is that you get kind of glimpses of each of the Gracie siblings, both as an adult and as a child, and those often interplay,
Mm,
between who these characters were and who they've become.
mm,
I think is really I think it's really kind of fascinating to get that glimpse of a person, almost across their kind of lifespan in a way.
yeah.
And I think it kind of calls into question your sympathies for the characters. So, some of the characters as children are kind of, really, I think you really root for as children. You're really impressed by them. You're really like, you feel very clearly that they are kind of
Mm,
a sort of great kid. And then in adulthood, they've become a very kind of questionable person
mm,
in a few cases. And so I think it's nice almost to have that reminder. I think it makes me think certainly about sort of the psychology of trauma, and if something's happened to you in your childhood that you've then had to live with through to
mm,
adulthood, does that make someone's behavior much more forgivable? Does it
mm,
change how you might view someone's actions when you see them as a child as
mm,
well? I think you have so much sympathy for the child, and maybe you lose it for an adult. And is that the right reaction to have?
mm.
I think that's a question sort of asked throughout the book in relation to the different characters, and it's something I'm really kind of interested in general.
I mean, this might seem like a really loose tie-in, but you said at the beginning you graduated to Stephen King, and one of Stephen King's works is It, obviously, with the Losers Club, and they're a collection of children, which obviously you do explore in your book as well. So I was just wondering if there is any sort of connection there between what you read and what you were influenced by as a younger reader, and to what you wanted to explore as a writer.
Yeah, it's actually, I can definitely see the It kind of like relevance there. It's a comparison that no one else has made so far. And it's sort of not something I was thinking about
Yes.
when I was writing, but I definitely see the connection. You have the kids and how what happened in their childhood has affected and sort of traumatized them later. I think that definitely the sort of darkness of Stephen King's books was something that always appealed. And I think he just writes such kind of fantastic characters as well. Thinking about The Dead Zone is my favorite Stephen King book. And yeah, I think
scary how close Donald Trump is to the character in Dead Zone.
Yes, yeah, it actually was. I think one thing Stephen King I think also does fantastically in both It and the Dead Zone, all his books, is kind of he really kind of makes you feel very, very acutely. Like his books I find incredibly moving and emotional. So you have that mix of kind of the darkness and sometimes the horror element, but they always really get you in like the heart as well. And that's something I hope that Girl A does for readers.
It certainly had the feedback in that sense, and by many, many people. Did that, for example, having the feedback by all these sort of well-known names, and even was quoted as being the book that will define a decade. Was all this sort of feedback of something that you hadn't even released yet? Was that a bit overwhelming as someone who hadn't, like I said, hadn't released a book yet?
It is a bit overwhelming, I think. Yeah, yes. I don't know if I have. I don't have another answer really.
Yeah.
I think it's that weird thing where I think you can only try to sort of detach from it slightly and just sort of in a way bring it back. I think a bit to like, well, are you happy with the writing, and are you sort of proud of the book? And I think to me the sort of above the the quotes and stuff, it's absolutely incredible, and just be absolutely beyond all kind of cliches and dreams and all sorts. I think it's the thing I'm sort of most excited about is having readers like meet your characters and sort of there's so many books and characters that over my life I've been obsessed with to different levels, or had like really like visceral reactions to, whether it's like loving them or completely detesting them. And I think that the idea that people will feel that for your characters is that's sort of the coolest part. I would say of having a book published. I've got some really kind of some emails have come in terms of people are really hating some of the characters, which is fantastic. Lex's ex-boyfriend JP doesn't go down well.
So Abigail, I saw a question before that somebody posed to you on your publisher's Q&A sort of thing that you were doing, and it was, are we going to see Lex and any of the Gracie family members again? And you kind of like shut that down. I was like, no, I'm doing the conspiracy, so I'm kind of done with that now. So my question, I suppose, is, was that always your plan, or once you finished Girl A, did you think, right, I want to move to something else, or I need to move to something else? So that's the question.
So yeah, to be honest, I just felt like that Girl A is kind of an absolute sort of closed story in a way. So I think I kind of feel very much like the characters, that's how they're left, is kind of within the novel. And yeah, I think it's then in a way for I often sort of imagine characters from particular books, and in how did things turn out, in the years that follow the end of the novel. And I think it's in a way something for readers then to decide or to think about, and not me. So I don't think they'll be making any kind of comebacks.
So would you be tempted? I know you're not tempted to go forward, but would you be tempted to go backwards and explore maybe a prequel?
I don't know. I mean, I guess one thing I would say is there are certain characters within Girl A who I've featured in short stories before. You know, not the short stories that anyone's sort of ever seen, but especially the detective who leads the Gracie family case, Greg Jameson. He has been in kind of short stories that I've written in the past. So maybe in that kind of capacity, I guess, you know, that maybe kind of minor characters might have kind of other stories to tell. But I think for Lex, that it's the full story is Girl A.
So I did read before that Jameson was one of your favorite sort of side characters that you wrote. So would you be tempted to sort of run with him and do a series with him?
I don't know. Yeah, I would need to think about it in a way. I mean, I guess in Girl A you get and just so kind of Greg Jameson is the kind of detective who is really involved in the Gracie case when it sort of comes to light, and sort of one of the first kind of police people to be involved in investigating it. I guess you get kind of small glimpses of other parts of his career in Girl A, and so I guess he's definitely sort of interests me in that respect. You know, like you get sort of a few sort of shots of some of the other cases that have haunted or troubled him that he can't quite shake off. Whether I would ever write anything more around him, I'm not sure. But he's certainly one of the characters that I really love, and I think if any characters were likely to reappear, he and the psychologist, I think, Dr. K, would be high on the list.
Nice.
We've got to ask this question because we need to move on soon to the second half of the show. But Lithe Hawk has asked the question that everyone wants to know the answer to. How do you auction a book or get bidding started for a book, you know, when it comes to publishing? And it is a question many people kind of look for or try to find an answer to. And this is something that you've experienced and done yourself. So did you have much input in that? And, you know, how was the process?
Yeah, so I can talk through sort of my own experience and hopefully that helps, because it might well be done in different ways, in different circumstances, but I can talk through the kind of what happened with Girl A. So I sent the book to agents rather than approaching kind of publishers directly, which I think is the kind of usual routes. Like, not many publishers, unfortunately, kind of accept submissions directly from writers. So when my agent sent Girl A out, she sent it to a list of around 18 different publishers. And really, it's a case that you send a book out and then you just wait to hear back. And the time periods vary massively. You know, of course, the first day you're kind of like on your email, like refreshing 16,000 times a day. And my agent Juliet's advice was very much, you know, well, look, nothing might happen for weeks. And I was actually away for work at the time, as kind of abroad, and with very poor phone signal. I was working on a deal, a legal deal, and really was very, very kind of cut off from my phone. And so I think Juliet sent the manuscript out to 18 different publishing houses. And I think it was about a week later that I got 5 missed calls from her when I was in a taxi with no phone signal whatsoever. And that was great, as you can imagine. So it was really a case then. She was ringing to say that one of the publishing houses had made a preemptive offer for the manuscript, and that would mean that if we accepted that offer, it would take the book off the table for the other publishing houses. So we would essentially accept it, and that would mean that we kind of had to cut off negotiations basically with everybody else. And she decided that she knew there were a few other publishers who had already expressed some interest, so she decided that we wouldn't go that route. And instead, we waited to hear back from all of the other publishers, and essentially multiple houses were interested. And then that enables your agent to run an auction. So she will then be like, okay, how much are people willing to pay for this book? And it kind of goes from there. So that's how you kind of fall into the auction process.
When you,
I was going to say, with your agent, Abigail, she's very well known and very well respected within the community. So how did you decide to approach Juliet in that respect? Did you always have her in mind, or did you just sort of approach everyone who you thought was kind of appropriate? Because there's a lot of people that watch this show that might be, trying to get an agent themselves, and they read the sort of bios that agents have, and they send their work out to them thinking, oh, that would be my ideal. I'd kind of like to get that person if I could. So I'm just wondering how you sort of like approach that process.
Yeah, I sort of set out Googling agents kind of ferociously. So I sort of spent a lot of time. I subscribed to the Bookseller in order to sort of understand recent deals and to get an idea of which agents were selling books that were sort of similar to Girl A. And I also had a pretty kind of long, hard think about what are the kind of comparison titles to this book, sort of taking away any kind of wishes to be like this writer or this writer, where would it kind of sit on a table in a bookshop? Like, what would be the books around it? And from there, I actually took a look at agents' websites, and a lot of agents will specify their favorite books, or, I'm looking for books like XYZ. And I remember that one of Juliet's favorite books was Room by Emma Donoghue, which is a completely incredible book. And I thought that there was certainly a few similarities in sort of theme between Room and Girl A. So she was always kind of on my list. But I'll be really honest here. So I actually didn't include Juliet when I first sent out the manuscript. Sent it to sort of 4 or 5 agents, and I sent it to Juliet last of that bunch because I was honestly like, there's no point sending it to Juliet Russian. Like, just who do you think you are? And so, I sort of sent it to her, like, I don't want to say it's an afterthought, but it was more like a sort of, oh, well, I'll give it a go. Like, we'll see. Yeah. It's not likely. And Julia is actually one of those agents who she reads kind of everything on her slush pile. She reviews everything that kind of comes across her desk. So, I guess my advice would be not to, don't discount your dream agent, because you never know. I think most agents I've encountered are just fantastic in terms of getting through their emails. Like they really do read what you send to them. So just give it a shot. Yeah, it will be my advice.
I was just going to ask before that question there, that when you had the agent on the phone offering the deals, the publishing houses, and that first one was turned down, was your thought process at the time, I'm not sure if this was the right thing to turn it down, or were you thinking, I have trust in this, and with the interest there, I'm happy to let it go forward?
I think you always have a sort of hesitation because, ultimately, to be completely honest, the dream for me was finish the book. That was sort of the first, dream, like just to actually write a novel. I was like, wow, okay, that's amazing. That's happened. And then it was really like, wow, like to have like just a few readers would be like amazing. That was like 100% was sort of beyond what I'd hoped for. So I think you do feel a bit nervous about the whole process, in terms of, well, should you just go for any chance like of getting published? It seems incredible. And I think what's great is having an agent, certainly like Juliet, who has a lot of experience, has a lot of guidance, and is used to the process. Because as a writer, it's always going to be quite unusual and new and frightening. So it was very much she sort of held my hand throughout.
I almost imagine like a Wolf of Wall Street situation with Leonardo DiCaprio and Matthew McConaughey being really experienced, and you just going, shouldn't we take the money? And the chick goes, no, it'll be fine, trust me.
Yeah, that was basically my role.
Fantastic. We got a couple of questions. That sounded like the Addams Family. I'm not sure what that was. We've got a couple of questions from the community. We normally split this, but we may as well, because we're pushing on, get through these questions, and then we'll do a bit of a game to finish up with. So one from Vince Stevenson. Hello to you. Abigail, where are you from?
I'm from just outside of Manchester. So I grew up in the Peak District, in a small village there. That's where the accent's from.
That's good. Okay, let's have a little look. That's kind of what we've answered already. Sorry, there's a lot of questions coming in, and we've answered quite a lot of them. How long did it take to write Girl A? I think you mentioned it kind of like a year. Yeah, so 3 months of solid writing, and then another 9 months of evenings and weekends of just sort of chipping away at the second half. How has your writing process that started many, many years ago in terms of as a young writer, just kind of experiencing writing as a pleasure kind of thing, did that change when you decided to sit down for those 3 months and attack that book at the 3-month point? I think it did. I think it didn't necessarily change, I think, because of the 3 months. I think it changed because I think writing a novel and having that sort of structure is maybe different from writing solely for pleasure. I think that if you're writing kind of just, or at least the way I used to write as a kind of child and teenager was, you just wrote all the most exciting scenes. You wrote the sparky dialogue, you wrote the like fantastic encounters, you got the pure pleasure. And I think when writing a novel, there's more structure required. There are some scenes that you probably need to write. There are some connections that need to be made that might not necessarily be, the moments that you are most fascinated in. In like 100,000 words, not every paragraph is going to be necessarily something that you feel pure joy about writing, I think. And I think then your job as a writer is to make those parts as interesting as you can, to make them something where you might not have sort of got a huge amount of pleasure in writing them. You might have wrestled with them and struggled and left them to last in the chapter. But a reader, is not going to see that. Like, you've still kind of electrified them. So I think it changed in that respect.
Yeah, I saw before that you commented on editing and the whole editing process. So I just wondered if you had any advice for anyone that had written the novel, they were really happy with it, but then they had to edit it as a result of what their agent may have said or may have advised. So what would your advice be to somebody who was at that point and they were going into the editing phase?
I guess in terms of editing when somebody else has provided the comments. So I think you have to approach editing with a relatively open mind. I certainly felt slightly like and question whether this is the best approach, but I felt like you're very involved in the novel. It can be difficult, I think, to see outside of it necessarily, and to get kind of a really objective point of view. So I really took the advice that that both Juliet and my editor Phoebe at HarperCollins, my editor in the US, Laura, I kind of took all of their advice kind of on board and did as much as I could to kind of to make those changes. And I think, you know, that if you saw the Girl A as it was when it was first submitted to Juliet, it's really kind of, you know, if you kind of had a comparison, it would have a lot of red, light red markup in it. I don't know. I think it's very useful to have kind of other pairs of eyes on something. But that said, there were points of kind of disagreement, and there were things that I did refuse to change. One thing in particular about the ending, I won't kind of go into details, but I was kind of pretty adamant that I was not changing that. So I think it's potentially kind of pick your battles, and I think, you know, editors and agents are, you know, they have a great deal of experience, and it's really, really valuable. But at the same time, sometimes you've got to stick to your guns, I guess.
So I know Girl A has only just come out, but going back to Stephen King, he was allowed to go back and bring out a version of The Stand that he wanted to present to everyone. If you were given the option to do that for Girl A, would you do that?
Absolutely not. No, I don't think I would. I think that to be honest, you know, I've certainly grown to love the book as it is. I don't think there'd be kind of value for anyone, certainly not for readers, in sort of seeing a previous draft. I have read Stephen King's extended Stand, and I actually did really love it. But yeah, at the same time, I'm not sure I'm going to have that privilege anytime soon. But no, I wouldn't do that.
It's kind of a loosely linked question to the last, and it is Genevieve. What is the word count of Girl A, and has that changed since you submitted it?
I don't think it has changed greatly. I think it's almost exactly 100,000 words, and I think it might have been 103,000 words. So not a massive change since submission.
Did that bother you that you had a perfect 100,000 that now is 103,000?
Also, I think in a way, I think it's become more perfect. So I think it's 100,000 now. Sorry, I might have not said that right.
Okay.
And it was 103,000. So we got rid of a few excessive words there.
I'd be tempted to do it myself, just to round it down, just get it on that number, because that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's good. We had a question there, but I think we literally just answered that. Did you ever disagree with changes to edits you wanted? Yeah, we just covered that one. Yeah, cool. I think we've kind of covered most of these questions, and a lot of it's already been covered, the questions we've had in. So what we'll do is we'll move on to
go
on.
We've got staple writing community chat show questions that we haven't even asked.
Well, go on then. We're just so behind time because this is.
I know this is such a good interview. Like, I mean, if no one else is enjoying it, I'm enjoying it.
Well, I know. Go on then. Staple questions.
So one of the staple questions that we have on the show is, if you could change the ending to any novel that you've read, which novel would it be and why?
Oh, it's a really, really tough question.
It is. Very tough question.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say a novel that I think has a fantastic ending, and I'm gonna say I want to change it because I want to know what it's an ambiguous ending, and I want to know what happened. So that's Kazuo Shigeru's The Buried Giant. It has an ending that I have actually had an argument with my husband and a friend about. You know, it was an argument where all three of us had completely different interpretations of the ending. And I think, so to me, that makes for a fabulous ending. I think, you know, that's kind of wonderful. And in a way, it gives the book this second life, right? You know, that everyone's got their own idea of how things have concluded. But I would love to resolve the argument. So I'll go for The Buried Giant because I want to know what's going to happen.
Okay. If you were going to take a character from fiction, whether, you know, literature or film, TV, and put that character into a world of your writing, what character would you take?
Oh, I love that question. So one of my all-time favorite characters, and I should say this is a controversial character. Some people absolutely loathe him. Is Holden Caulfield. I think a fantastic character, and I would love to see Holden like in later life, potentially as kind of like an old, really kind of old furious man. So I would take him because again, it's one of those cases where you kind of don't want to disturb The Catcher in the Rye. It's such a kind of beautiful, perfect book in my view. But I would just want more of Holden and his voice and his narrative.
Old man Holden. That'd be very Holden. Interesting, actually.
Go on, Chris. Put morbid in there.
Yeah. And the final, slightly morbid question is: you're on your deathbed. You're looking back at your writing career. What are you going to be happy with?
I would be happy that I had made readers feel something. To me, that is the sort of pinnacle of books. It's why I love books. Whether they leave me feeling kind of devastated or amused or joyful or very uncomfortable, it's why I kind of keep going back. So that's what I would hope, and that's what I feel proud of.
I'm pretty sure that with the amount of books you sold and the hype around this, you probably already have made a lot of readers feel something. And so achieved. Well done. Yeah, wicked. So let's get on to the randomness of the show even more so, and let's introduce a new family member. Abigail, do you like a bit of rock music?
Yes, big music. I actually found music very inspiring for writing. Yeah. What type of music? Because we talked about this a lot, and especially in my writing's always been music, and I've always had to have a certain type, and in fact the same playlist over and over. Do you do something similar, or do you just like any kind of music? So no, I had a pretty specific playlist for Girl A, and I actually write in complete silence. It's sort of the only kind of odd quirk that I have about writing. But I listen to music kind of before writing. Like some sort of like sportsman,
like Rocky going into it.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. So I listen to music for inspiration a lot and for ideas. I don't actually write to music.
I love that. It's like do come on, and then shh. Just silence. Wow, that's fascinating. Well, we often. We talked about the certain types of music, because obviously like rock music gets people kind of worked up, or like, fast and loud music, and then certain like relaxing songs help people write differently. So to write in absolute silence, I think would be more distracting for me than to write with music. I'm not sure I'd like that. My brain would come alive at that point. I'd be like, no, do you want to hear that? So yes, that's the reason I'm asking about music, is because we have a new family member where we introduce someone that's following the show that has only a few followers, and we're trying to give them some support on Twitter by following them and posting a GIF. So when I play this little video, Abigail, have a little think about a GIF of something you like, and it could be anything at all, and we will GIF that person and welcome them to the show. So there is the music. And is there a GIF that you're aware of, or is it something you want to think about? It can be literally anything. We've had dry shampoo, which is weird. Octopus. We've had many things.
Just to reiterate, he's not saying gift. He's saying GIF, because this was a cause of confusion a few weeks back.
Do you know what? I can't say gifts or gifts. They're kind of similar.
So we're not sending anyone a GIF?
No. Yeah, we are. Not a gift.
Yeah, not a gift.
GIF. Got it. So I'm thinking that music I'm thinking like an open road.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
Inspiring.
Yeah. I'm thinking of open road in California, maybe. I don't know. Do you think we can find a GIF of that?
Like a Fearing Las Vegas type of thing. Yeah,
City kind of on the distance, yeah.
So Rosalind Shields at Rosalind Shields. Hi, I'm an inspiring author and reader of adult fiction, fantasy, comedy, romance, and psychological novels. And she has 50 followers, which is quite low. So if we could get she has only recently joined Twitter, but is part of the writing community. And she's followed the show. So can we give her a follow and send her a GIF, GIF, not GIFT, of like an open road highway kind of drive-in type of thing. And we'll leave that up to you.
So Abigail, I saw before that one of your desert island books was The Road. Why is that? And if you could take more than the 3 that you mentioned before, let's say 5, and for those who don't know the other 2, because I've given one away, obviously, what would those books be and why?
Yes, I think the other ones, it was Sarah Hall's A Beautiful Indifference and Kazuo Shigeru's Never Let Me Go. So the road for me was a massive kind of inspiration for Girl A. I just think it's an absolutely kind of stunning book. I think it's it's obviously incredibly bleak. It's set in kind of real post-apocalyptic landscape of the US after kind of environmental devastation. But at its sort of heart is the relationship between the man and the boy, father and son, who are kind of heading trying to get to the coast. And I think it just has this stunning balance of kind of the beauty of this relationship and kind of the tenderness of it, and this kind of gorgeous dialogue that takes place throughout the book between those 2 characters, surrounded by this incredibly tense, frightening landscape. So yeah, it sort of balances kind of emotional devastation with sort of great adventure and excitement, and I think it's just a fantastic book.
Sounds brilliant.
My other 2, I would probably have it's tough. A top 5. That's
we can come back. We can come back to that.
I'm going to have to come back to that. Yeah, I probably need at least 4 weeks to.
Yeah, just tweet us in a month, so we might have an answer.
Abigail, in terms of a relationship between 2 people, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw a post that said that a painting inspired you to write Girl A, and in that painting it was the 2 children, one slightly older than the other, holding hands in what looked to be the edge of the sea. So I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit and why that painting in particular inspired you to write Girl A.
Yeah, the painting is Children in the Sea, and I think it's something. It's a painting I've seen quite a lot. I'm not kind of quite sure sure where I first saw it, but it's something I've always kind of often sort of looked at, and it just depicts this kind of. I think it's a relationship between sisters, and it could be small kind of childhood friends. Equally, it's obviously unclear from the picture itself, but it's almost this kind of slight dependence of the 2 of them. It's a very, very simple picture of they're kind of wading into the sea together, and you get the impression that one of them is leading the other. Potentially the slightly smaller, younger one is leading the other. It just kind of captures a slightly uncertain, sort of gentle moment. And yeah, I've just always kind of always thought of it. And when I was thinking of this sister relationship in Girl A, it was a picture that I sort of went back to and kept thinking about.
It's amazing. Anya has said on the chat that if you type Highway 66 and Desert Road into Twitter, a lot of cool GIFs come up.
Yes, that's
so for
awesome.
future reference,
thanks, Anya.
future reference, just do that. Okay, so we've got a silly game to play to finish the show off, and this is a new one, ladies and gentlemen, a new game for you guys. And yes, I've created a video that Chris has not approved or seen yet, so it's always a fun part of the show to know if he's going to have a disappointed face or a happy face at the end of this. And you're more than welcome to comment on the video that I play and say happy face or sad face, or Chris, we're disappointed once again. But here is the video for a new game that we call Play Your Drafts Right. Happy face, sad face, Chris?
Underwhelmed face, if you can open it, though.
I'll take underwhelmed face. And Halo, again, no, not battle to the death. And we keep telling you, it doesn't go down well these days. People get arrested and it just gets messy. Okay,
I'm terrified of this game because I know what this game is, even though I don't know what's going to come up. But I also know that Abigail is going to be amazing.
I know she is, yeah.
So I'm going to lose.
Well, what we used to do, guys, is have a game called Guess the Year. Okay, and we had a load of books from the same year, and we'd try and guess between Abigail and Chris Hooley. It would be between the two of you to guess what year it was over the course of 10 books, and it was kind of a bit tricky to work out the kind of score. So this is something you guys can play on the chat.
But on that, I am currently the reigning champion because I've won more than I lost.
Well, yeah, okay, but this is a new game, so anyway, so you in the chat can play this. Just comment up higher or lower in, play your cards right. It's our version of this with books. So we start off. Did you get the concept? Higher or lower? Quite simple. If you get it,
higher or lower links to the year. So if it's earlier or later,
and you'll get a point if you get the right one, and you get no points if you get the wrong one. So whoever gets the most points between the two of you at the end of this wins the game. Happy?
I think so.
I'm not happy, but I'm
Chris
willing
can
to
go
play.
first.
Okay, so we start off with The Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling, 1894. So, is Harry Potter box set books 1 to 5 by J.K. Rowling higher or lower than 1894?
Oh, this is a nice, easy one. So
starting off easy.
Yeah, it's much, much higher.
Much, much higher. Abigail, are we in agreement with this?
We are. I wish I'd gone first now.
Oh, it's okay. Well, you can swap this if you want, or alternate.
Yeah, we'll take it in turns.
Okay, so that's 1 point apiece, nice and easy. That was in 2003. So, is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee higher or lower than 2003 for its release?
That's lower.
Definitely.
Both lower. There's higher on the chat, but I think that's old, the last one. Okay, so To Kill a Mockingbird, is it lower than 2003? 1960, very much so. So that's a point each. Well done. Doing well. It does get harder. So, 1984 by George Orwell.
Oh, it's my turn to go first, isn't it?
On, Chris. Is that higher or lower than 1960?
This is George Orwell, so I'm going to say lower.
Okay.
I would say the same. I think it's lower.
Okay, both gone lower. Is there anyone on the chat that's got one? Christopher Platt says lower. Anya says plower. Lower, and that's Vince. And then Lyth says that's a tough one. It is a tough one. It's quite close, but we'll go in lower on the chat as well. And it is indeed lower. That is 1949, which I thought was quite tricky, the fact he called it 1984. So the next one, Animal Farm by George Orwell, higher or lower than 1949? And it says first published because it was published once after that as well.
I'm going to go lower again, but very hesitantly.
Okay. Chris?
Just for the sake of entertainment, I'm going to go higher.
So Animal Farm, is it higher or lower than 1949? Abigail said lower. Chris Hooley said higher. It is 1945, so it is indeed lower. So puts Abigail 1 point up. Tense. Lower, I think. Anya, you were correct. Linda was incorrect.
Linda was with me now. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, it's stuck in. Okay, so is this book higher or lower than 1945? This book is The Book Thief by Marcus Zukas. Zasak. Oh my goodness. I've had a glass of cherry Pepsi. I'm not drinking. I haven't drank all January. I've had a glass of cherry Pepsi and it has wrecked my face. I don't know what's going on.
It's
The Book Thief
massively higher. The Book
by
Thief.
Marcus Zasak. Is it higher or lower than 1945?
Like very recent.
Okay.
I'm with Chris, higher. Yep.
Excuse the swearing, but Anya says higher by fucktons. Indeed, it is higher, 2005. So you're both correct there. Well done. Couple more to go. Okay, so we're in 2005. Is The Hunger Games higher or lower than 2005?
Higher.
Higher by Abigail.
Oh, I'm getting second thoughts.
Chris
now.
Hooley's face is pondering at the screen. Anyone on the chat?
I'm going to say lower because The Hunger Games is the first in quite a big series, and the series is finished, and it finished quite a while ago, in my opinion.
Slightly higher on the chat, higher on the chat, and higher, I think, on the chat. So, Chris, you said higher or lower?
Damn it, I said lower.
And Abigail, higher?
Yeah.
We were looking at 2005. This book was released in 2008, so it was higher. So, Abigail is now 2 points ahead with a couple left. Okay, 2008 we're in, and is this book higher or lower than 2008? The book is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. 2008 we're looking at. Is it higher or lower?
You sounded so much like a farmer there.
Trying to sell my stock.
Yeah, I'm gonna say lower because I think the films were out at that point, and surely the book was much, much earlier than the films. In my opinion, that's all I'm gonna say.
Abigail's face is really pondering.
Yeah, I am pondering. I'm trying to think about myself at 2008.
Writing fan fiction.
Yeah, writing fan
lower,
fiction.
a bit lower, lower.
I was
higher.
For interest, I'm gonna go. Sorry, did you go lower or higher?
Yeah, I went lower. So
I'll go higher, slightly higher, but I might have taken a terrible turn there.
So 2008 was the year, and Twilight is lower by 3 years. So that gives Mr. Hooley a point back, and there's 1 point in it with a couple left to go. Well done, the chat, for getting that right. Okay, 2005 we are in, and this book is called The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. Is that higher or lower than 2005?
Higher.
Straight in there, Chris.
I remember reading this book in Asda.
What, the whole book there?
Yeah, I opened it and I didn't know it was like young adult sort of fiction. It was just there in the charts, and I remember reading the first few pages and I was like, wow, this is very different to anything I've ever read before.
Is that the point they kicked you out of the store?
No, but I read like a good quarter of the book and I was like, I'm gonna have to buy this now because I'm invested.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I remember weeping at this book. What a book! Yeah. I think it's higher as well in 2005.
You both gone higher. Everyone said higher except for Joanne, who said no idea. So 2005 we were looking for this higher or lower. It is in fact higher. It's 2012. So there was a point for you each there.
I've actually got a story about weeping. I read A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, but I'd never read A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. I'd read other stuff by Patrick Ness, but I was going to see him that evening. And now my current girlfriend, I was picking her up from work and I was reading A Monster Calls in the car, and I just finished it. And I was in floods of tears, like literally like a member of my family had died. That's how much I was crying. And she got in the car and she was like, oh my God, like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I was like, nothing, I've just finished this book. And she was like, oh, like, and I was like, please don't mention it's Patrick Ness. First thing she said when we got to the front of the queue for him to sign my book, he was crying like a baby to your book before. So
good moment.
Yeah, it was a great compliment. And how can you not cry? Like, a kid said goodbye to his mum. Like, sorry for the spoiler, but the whole book was a metaphor of him saying goodbye to his mum. And at the end of it, I was just like, bleh.
I guess I'll skip that one then, Chris.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we've got 2 left, and there is 1 point in this. So it's this next one is crucial.
Ooh.
So Chris, if you get the next one, you can win it. But if you don't get the next one, the best you can do is draw. So in
Ooh.
2012, and the book we're looking to see if it's higher or lower is Ready Player One.
I'm say higher.
Okay, so Ready Player One, higher or lower, 2012?
So I don't know, but as a sort of gamble, I'm going to go lower, and then we can make things really exciting.
That would be if you weren't correct by going lower. It is 2011. So that means Abigail. It was 1 year earlier.
Wow.
So I think, Chris, you can only lose by 1 point if you get the next one. So unfortunately, this new game does not suit you just yet. So the last one we have is The Martian by Andy Weir. Is that higher or lower than 2011?
Higher.
Higher question mark from Anya?
Yeah, I remember reading this novel. I was in Turkey at the time, and I read it. And the pages, like they do when you're on holiday in a really hot country, the pages melt. So I was like trying to put it together as I was reading it.
The way the pages melt when I go on holiday is because we're camping somewhere that's really cold and we're burning the pages to stay warm. That's the only time I get a multi-page, my friend.
Yeah. So I'm going to say higher than 2011.
Martian higher.
Yeah, this is one I'm really unsure about. I'll go lower because I feel bad following Chris when I've sort of unsure myself. But yeah, I'm not sure about this one at all.
Well, you know what? You've demolished him anyway, so you may as well. So 2011 was the year we started with, and this is higher by 3 years, 2014. So Chris pulls one back, and that is the end of that game. And I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 versus 7. I don't think that's right.
I'll take that though. I mean, Abigail was a Waterstones bookseller at one point, so I'm pretty happy with that, to be fair.
But you were quite good with your specific memories of where you read books.
I am, honestly, when I read a book, I know exactly where it was. Like I could bang straight back to the moment.
And they all seem to have a good theme as well. They weren't just, I read it in my bed or,
No.
sat on the sofa.
The Martian, the day after, I got so drunk on gin, I couldn't see.
Wow. Was that because you were trying to be in space or?
No, I think it was sunburn on my eyelids because I fell asleep somewhere.
Fantastic. Yeah. Do you have any stories of, I don't know, you've been in sort of book conferences, I guess, before, or book sort of launches kind of things for your job before. Is there any stories, like weird ones with those sort of stories?
I do actually, none that I can think of. I sort of worked at the Waterstones in Manchester, which got a lot of the kind of commercial sort of books, and often the Waterstones on Deansgate would have kind of very kind of like sort of, they would have real literary events, and we got like the range of really fun events. So I do remember very vividly that in my first week, David Hasselhoff came to do I mean, that was like my first week. Where do you go from there? It's not,
I mean, really.
It's going to have to be.
Definitely.
Fantastic. Well, just before we kind of wrap up, because we're over our time, but it's fine. It's fine. Absolutely fine. Just want to point out that your book is for sale, obviously, everywhere. And it is honestly one of the best covers I think I've ever seen. I love that cover. And just hold it up a sec there, Chris. The fact that the A is kind of not full on, it's really nice. The girl's face looks wicked in that. And the fact that the black strip is so bulky and it covers her eye, it makes you really focus on that as if it's meant to be there or not, or if the eye looks kind of evil. It's a real weird kind of amazing way they've done that, and I think it's fantastic. But I've ordered this today, but I didn't realize on the Waterstones website you can buy this until Monday. That's actually got this with your signature on, but that finishes on Monday. So if you want that with a signature, go to Waterstones and get it. Otherwise, you can get it on Amazon.
So I'm guessing the question there is, your arm still killing after signing all of those books?
No, it wasn't a
I've
question.
just about recovered. I just recovered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also, I think it's available like bookshop.org as well. If because I know like local bookshops have had a tough time in
Mm.
lockdown, so you can also get it there. I should just say if you want to kind of support your local bookshop too.
Yeah, definitely. And in the description of the podcast and the video when you're watching this, you can see all the links for all that stuff there, including the links for our Be a Token sponsor, the book that we're at the start of the show, and the Spotify link that you mentioned as well. So just have a look at that and please follow up on some of them and just give them the support. And Abigail, all we can say is thank you so much for joining us. And I imagine you're kind of still living on the cloud after yesterday, and just hope that it all goes really well for you. And it's very exciting, and well done.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and have a great weekend.
What was that, Chris?
I'm going to say bye, Girl 8. You won't regret it. It was a fantastic interview from Abigail, and it's a brilliant book. It's probably at the end of this year going to be that book up at the top of your list. So make sure you get a copy of it because it's brilliant.
Hey, so thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. As I said, hit the notification bell so that when we do the lives, you don't miss them and you can engage with us. Otherwise, pick it up on the podcast for us and support us that way because your support is fantastic and that's what keeps us going. Incredible show. Thank you so much, Abigail. Great show. Good luck and congratulations. Thank you, guys. And Huli is a vagabond reader with burnt eyelids. What a great show. Well, thank you, guys. Fantastic. Honestly, have a great weekend, all of you guys. It's been a kind of crazy week, especially for you guys watching from America. I bet you've maybe broken dry January after that week. So enjoy it. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you Sunday for the plot twist project. I think Mr. Huli might be with us this Sunday. Who knows? I decided that we might put a bit of a sound bed below it this week and just have a bit of a laugh, as well as try and write this story that is written by the community, which is, a handful of issues, but it's fun. So we'll see you Sunday if you're up for that. And thank you for tuning in. And
now we get to wave. This is the fun part.
Bye, guys. Thank you. See you soon. I always wave like